Good morning, DC United fans, and welcome in to Tried and True, the morning after show, presented by Heineken 0.0, as we'll talk you through DC United's third consecutive defeat, this time at the hands of Atlanta United FC 2-1 last night at Audi Field. And it's John and Michael this morning. Michael, good morning. How we feeling?
Awake, ready to talk about the game. Sometimes it's good to have a few hours to kind of process and think about things that have happened, and I guess that's what we'll get into today. I don't know. Maybe I'm not here.
Yeah, lots to talk through. And another frustrating way to lose for DC United last night. I thought the game was ugly. Definitely the first half. I remember talking to you and the folks around us just about there wasn't much of a rhythm to the game. I think both DC United and Atlanta fans were united in their disdain for the refereeing last night, which made things further choppier throughout the game. But really in the second half, it felt like a gut punch to me because DC United seemed to be really pushing to take the lead when they conceded the goal, and just all the air went out of the building.
Yeah, I hesitate to say that it felt like a DC United game of old where you are depending on basically mood swings for how the game ends up playing out, because really DC United had cleaned up a lot of the problems in that second half. Like the first half, we were getting countered repeatedly, which is what Atlanta was looking to do, and had success on their first goal there from Joseph. But frankly, in the second half, DC United had really taken the front foot and were pushing for opportunities. I think at the end of the day, we ended up with 27 shots, only 6 or 7 of those on target, which is not a great rate, but there's opportunities there that didn't end up panning out. So I definitely hear what you're saying as far as having that goal late in the second half after the 80th minute from Moreno that came through and really just kind of scored it through there. Atlanta did not look like they were going to be rattling up lots of goals like the Atlanta of old that you kind of think of from their MLS Cup days. So I definitely hear you there. But I mean, the team looks good. They made adjustments. It just didn't come off for them last night, and stacking that on top of as a third consecutive loss is frustrating, especially against a team right with you in the playoff standings.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was, upon reflecting on it, which is a little what we could do a little bit more when we do the show the next day. It was a better performance out of John Kempen than it's been this week, and particularly in Nashville. I think it was just emblematic of the week when that last goal went in to give Atlanta the lead and ultimately the win, just to see Kempen watching the ball go past him and then having to fish it out of the net. We've seen that so many times this week, and I think that kind of piqued my frustration. I mean, this is a team that gave up 10 goals in a week over 3 games. But I don't think that final goal certainly wasn't on Kempen, and more probably 3 or 4 times Atlanta was in 2-on-1, 3-on-1, 1-on-0, and Kempen made a couple saves. There were a couple misses, but overall I think it was a better performance out of Kempen. I just don't. I guess I'm struggling to understand it with the back line how we gave up so many of those opportunities on counters.
Yeah, particularly, like we said, in the second half, Atlanta's opportunities were few and far between. They still have the firepower to create those opportunities, but really it was a question of them executing and DC United failing to. Remember, we had several opportunities where DC United could have put the ball in the back of the net. To put it high up into the supporters section on a goal that looked basically open. If we're going to call it in clinical, that has to be in the back of the net. But we also, may have been a bit fortunate not to give up a penalty in the first half and go down 2-0 going into halftime. So, again, it goes back and forth. But I agree with you. I think Kempen had a better game. He isn't going to stand on his head and carry the team, but certainly serviceable. And if we come away with a draw, I don't think either side could have really begrudged it.
No, I certainly would have taken it. But as we look at the starting 11 for DC United last night, we talked a little bit. Is this potentially one of the strongest 11s we have available right now? We had a couple players return from injury. Aiden Har back starting along with Russell Canals. Edison Flores put in another great shift, in my opinion. Was there anything surprising to you about the starting 11 last night?
No, I think that this is, like you said, is probably pretty close to what you're looking for. I think it's a little bit interesting that you're still seeing Mora getting, the run out as that wing back. We've talked about how that's not necessarily where he's at, but if you're going to put Paredes in that, more forward attacking role, you're not really going to slot Yao back in there. And you saw that kind of shift later in the game where you moved Paredes back and brought Yao in for him.
Right.
You know, with Briant being out with an injury, we think having Alfaro in there makes sense, and Heinz still on the long term end. I think the biggest hole that you're missing is Areola, and I don't really know where he goes here. Maybe if you have Paul available, Paul goes up for Kevin, and then Kevin slots back in the Mora
I think
role.
that's right.
But
Yeah.
other than that, it's pretty close to about the best thing we can put together. Uh, and again, not a terrible performance from the team. Uh,
No.
a rough result.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and
What
I'm
do you
looking
think, John?
forward to talking a little bit more here shortly about about the goalkeeping situation. We'll do that after we get to the post game press conference. But this is the time of season where I'm constantly reminding myself and other fans that we talk to about we don't see what goes on day in and day out at practice. We don't know who's playing to what level, who's to what level of fitness. As well as obviously the coaching staff does. At the beginning of the season, it's a lot easier for us to kind of say, well, we've seen guys like Emil Assad before. They was playing pretty well at the end of last season. We'd expect to see him get more minutes. At this point, I'm curious what is going on with a player like Emil Assad, because this seemed like a game where he could have potentially came in as an attacking option. They moved Paredes back, but who did they bring in for? I'm looking at the subs right now. So Skundrich came in for Flores in the 61st minute, and then we had Felipe and Avila and Yao all come on later on. So they used 5 subs. Jamil Assad was not one of them, and just as you pointed out, that Joseph Mora being a little bit out of sorts in that wing back role, they moved Kevin back. I thought Assad could be a potential option there in that Areola slot, and it doesn't seem like he's getting minutes these days.
No, I agree. And again, we I don't think we're calling for Yamil to be on the field, although I did pick him as my potential player of the year at the beginning of the year, and I'm certainly regretting that based on performance through 20 games or lack thereof. But particularly, when you have a chance to play a guy against his former team, like you saw what happened with Emma Boateng the other day, definitely making sure that DC United understood what we had given up when we let him move on to greener pastures. You would have thought there might have been a little bit more fire there from Yamil, but at this point, he's having trouble cracking the lineup. He had a pretty good amount of minutes on Wednesday night, and so he's certainly still in the rotation. But I don't know. No, we're probably not going to get a clear answer from Lasada on that. He's not prone to talking about individual player performances or statuses beyond whether they might be injured or not. So I guess we're going to have to continue to try to read the tea leaves there. But I too was surprised to not get Assad out there.
Yeah, and with that, let's go ahead and flip over to head coach Hernan Lasada's post-game press conference.
Reina is scoring, because that's the most difficult one, and the easy ones are we are missing. So it's unlucky today, and that's it. We need to move forward.
Go to Mario Amaya.
Hola Hernán, solo quiero preguntar, en un partido reñido donde ambos equipos tuvieron muchas oportunidades en creación de goles, quiero preguntar qué fue lo que hizo bien el equipo y qué son algunas de las cosas que puede mejorar el equipo ya llegando al final de la temporada.
El equipo hizo todo bien. Todo bien. Generó situaciones de gol, presionó, hizo falta, defendió transpirando la camiseta, dejando la vida en cada pelota. No sé si se le puede pedir más al equipo.
Coach, there's no more questions. You're good.
Really? No more?
No more unless anyone wants to jump in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
That's DC United head coach Hernan Losada. Surprised that there weren't more questions there at the end, and I apologize to our listeners we had some technical difficulties there with the audio at the beginning, but we can fill you in a little bit on what you may have missed there. I didn't quite get bingo on the Hernan Losada press conference bingo card today, but it was close. He did mention the Atlanta United budget being much higher than that of DC United and the millions that they had on the field. He mentioned that they did not deserve to lose today, and he did mention that the team is in a good place mentality-wise throughout the interview. So all joking aside of some of the similar refrains we get from the Losada era press conferences, Michael, your thoughts on Coach's recap of last night's game?
Yeah, and I'll tack onto that the needing to finish chances. That's certainly a common refrain we've heard. And obviously it's a tough format when you're going right after the game. So appreciate y'all bearing with us, bringing you the post-game press conference here on the morning after show. I think we're going to have to get into talking about the comments about the roster building. Losada is clearly frustrated by it, and we've touched on it in the past, talking about how if you have a roster where you've spent millions and millions, you have higher expectations for what the players can do, and that generally indicates a higher level of talent. It's not quite a situation where we've had years in the past, like 2013, 2017, where not many of our players could crack the lineup for the other team. Really, anyone we're playing, but we would have a hard time seeing many of the DC United players in an Atlanta uniform based on how much they're spending and how much they're doing. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're better players, but there's a different profile. And I think you did see a different level of touch and a different level of quality out there last night. That doesn't mean that you can't overcome it, but the margins are a bit tighter when you're playing against a team that has higher levels of talent out there. And you've got to, play your system. You saw that DC United was having success with the press, obviously having success creating chances. I don't think Losada is too far off base saying that a tie would probably have been well deserved, but you gave up 2 goals. I think Kempin had 2 saves on the night. Had a couple other guys, stand up big in defense. But at the end of the day, we're not going to have a whole lot of success if DC United's only scoring 1 goal a game. It's not a system that's built to hold on to 1-0 or try to get a 1-1 result out of it. What do you think, John?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I want to go a little bit deeper on the comments that Losada continues to make about the roster composition and the sort of financial situation we find ourselves in, because I've gone back and forth on it a couple of times. I think I was with you a show or 2 ago, and I was getting tired of hearing that, because it is reality, right? It is the world we live in. DC United does not have as deep of pockets, or at least they haven't flexed that muscle on the field this season or last season, and perhaps that's where we're going down the road. We all hope that we'll see a little bit more spending, but I'm almost kind of swinging back the other way on the pendulum, because as fans, it is a constant gripe that we have, of like we line up against a team like Atlanta or against, any of these teams that have constantly filled out their DP slots, and then they're spending a ton of TAM. They're doing everything they can to get the best players available on their roster. No one's hearing our voices, right? We're sometimes screaming into the void on Twitter and complaining that we're not spending enough money. Losada's in a very unique position in the fact that he's the coach of this team. And so is there something to be said for him constantly saying that to the media and I'm presumably behind the scenes as well in conversations with, Lucy Rushton and Dave Casper and hopefully Jason Levian about, guys, you got me handcuffed here. Like, you're seeing what we can do as we bring this style in, as we get the fan base on board with playing this exciting style of soccer. We don't have good enough players. We've got a lot of talent on this team, but if you bring in one or two more high-end players, all of a sudden, we're probably gaining some more points this week, and all of a sudden we're near the top of the standings permanently, not, ebbs and flows throughout the season. I wonder if there's something to Losada's continued messaging here of really trying to get ownership to see that this project doesn't work if we don't invest a little bit more on the field.
Yeah, and I think we do have to caveat it with the observation that our highest paid players, our DPs, Paul and Edison, haven't been on the field together more than about the 10 minutes. And again, they scored during this 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You're starting to see some of that quality from Edison. And you'd like to get Paul back out there as soon as you can, within the confines of trying to remain healthy and what have you. But I think you're exactly right when you talk about having to make investment in the team. Soccer, for better or for worse, is even in a salary cap league, you're functioning in an international system where you spend more and you're likely to get a higher end player. Atlanta's fresh on the mind. Played them last night. They're having a disappointing season. They went out and dropped $12 million on an attacker who is coming off the French league title. Who had a pretty good game yesterday. I didn't score, but you could see that quality there. And I'm not calling for DC United to spend $12 million speculatively, and certainly not panic buys. But at some point, the roster, the quality is going to bear out what we're seeing. And unfortunately, I think you saw a little bit of that last night with a loss that could have been a point. Probably in Losada's mind should have been a point, but you're still only getting maybe 1 point out of that game.
Yeah, and all that's to say, I mean, when we take a quick peek at the standings here, I mean, definitely agree. Disappointing season for Atlanta. They're tied with us on 27 points, and I think most DC United fans, removed from this painful week of 3 consecutive defeats, would say that we're having a pretty good season, perhaps even above expectations overall. Maybe not. Maybe folks feel differently. I think that's where my head is right now. There's an element of disappointment because we were talking going into the Nashville game about how we were a couple points off of second place, and now we're very much clinging to that red line, tied with Atlanta and only 3 points ahead of Columbus for a playoff spot. But the teams right above us are right there. It is very bunched up, with the exception of New England, that is absolutely just run away with the regular season in the East. But when you look at the makeup of some of these teams above DC United, Montreal to me is a similar situation. DC United should be competing with Montreal. New York City, they got a ton of money. And then they have not performed this year. I think they're similarly disappointed in their season so far. And Nashville's an interesting case. It just jumps out at me every time. 11 draws on the year. Nashville is the case of get the points. If you can, you're going to be disappointed in some of those games where maybe we should have had 3, but you ended up with 1. But the games where you could have had 0 and you ended up finding a point, they're on 32 in 4th place as a result of that. So lots of opportunity here for DC United. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about Philly coming to town next. But we've got Steve Birnbaum, who joined for the second half of the post-game press conference, and we'll send it over to Steve now.
We'll go to Jason Anderson first.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for speaking with us.
Yep.
I wanted to ask, in a game where you had so many chances as a group, um, how did you see the game playing out, especially with the fact that Atlanta was able to counter so much before halftime, and then after halftime, they really only had the one or two looks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we were a bit open and in the first half, and our press wasn't great as a collective, but we still had chances to nick one in the first half, and then obviously we were putting them on them in the second half, and it felt like there was more to come, obviously goal scoring wise, with the amount of shots and chances we had in their box. So it was unfortunate not to get that, and then to go up a second like we did in the second half when they didn't really have much in the second half was kind of a gut check. So just back to the drawing board and getting ready for next week.
We'll go to Jose Umania.
Hey, Steve. Just listening to Hernan, he said there was nothing more he could ask for you guys to do. He felt that you guys played a miraculous game. What's the attitude in the locker room now? It's 3 straight losses, but still having your coach come out here and saying you guys are doing everything right to earn the result.
Yeah, I mean, vibe in the locker room is disappointment right now. We felt like obviously we did enough to win that game, or at least get something out of the game, and the last game as well. So, we're making tiny errors to in these games that are ending up, punishing us and making losses for us. So disappointment, but we know we still got a ton of games left. We're still in a good position in the East. We have to go back and look at the film and correct those mistakes and make sure that we don't do this again. And obviously finish our chances. We have a ton out there, so finish a couple of those. I think that's a different game out there. So on to the next one for Saturday.
We'll go back to Jason Anderson.
Steven, I wanted to ask about obviously the goal that Reyna scored tonight was pretty spectacular. It seems like he's very suddenly kind of found not just good form, but a massive amount of confidence. What have you seen from him, in training, away from the field, all of that stuff that has allowed him to sort of find his best form?
Yeah, I mean, the talent's there. He's awesome. He's got so much skill, and you can see it obviously in the games. He does the same stuff in training, so it's great. He's got some confidence going, and he's feeling good. So we're gonna ride that train as long as possible. He's doing great.
Steve, that's it, man. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well, the locker room remains in good spirits, it sounds like, after listening to Steven Birnbaum there. And your thoughts on what he had to say?
Yeah, I think certainly listening to him talk, you cheer up a bit thinking about that goal from Yordi. That was a fantastic strike, and to have the presence of mind to look up and say, hey, Guzan's not quite back there yet. He's still kind of setting up. Why not have a go? Felipe did something similar in the Capital Cup, just sneaking it under the wall. Put it up there, have a chance, and do it. And Losada mentioned earlier that you shouldn't have to rely on a world-class goal to create scoring for you, because without that this is a 1-0 or perhaps a 2-0 game, despite the number of chances there. But it certainly seems like, and again, Steve is a model captain when it comes to talking to the media. He's not going to step out too much. He's always very on message, but I think it's fairly reflective of what we've heard from the other players, that they believe in what we're doing. Certainly frustrated when things don't turn out their way, but it's a tough thing to do. Come out in these press conferences afterwards and talk about games that are disappointing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of my favorite phrases to use during a game, especially when things are a little bit shaky in the back, is adventures in the back line. And I look at DC United this season, and they've been living that, but not necessarily because we don't have talent back there, but because the injuries have just been devastating. It's been hard to even establish any sort of continuity across the back line. I think, coming into this season, it was very much expected that your 3 center backs would be Birnbaum, Pines and Heinz Ike, and Pines and Heinz Ike have been unavailable for a good portion of the season as of late. Birnbaum was unavailable for a good portion of the season at the beginning. And so thank God we've had Andy Nahar been able to step in. Alfaro's put in some good shifts. He's had some shakier shifts. But that has been tremendously challenging. And I just, while you were talking there, I was looking here to see, sort of this year compared to last year in terms of goals scored and goals against. Last year, DC United only scored 25 goals on the season. They gave up 41. That was in an entire season. Well, I guess 23 games we played last year. This year, we're right around that mark. We're 2 games shy of that. We're at 21 right now. We have already scored 32 goals, and we've only given up 31. So just to kind of put into perspective, we haven't given up nearly as many goals as we did last season, but the output is much higher. And I think we've talked ad nauseum about Ola Kamara coming into his own. Last night, I'm sure he would be the first to tell you it was not his best game of the season. He missed some chances, as you pointed out. But seeing Yordi Reyna come in with confidence now is awesome to see. Kevin Paredes seems more confident on the ball. Last night was not perhaps his best game either. But the attacking options really are there. And if the back line can get some health back, and maybe you get Bill Hamid back down the stretch, I still think this team could do some damage in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, if you think back to last year, obviously DC United pulled off a late winner against Atlanta in Atlanta. But the first time we played Atlanta here in DC, again, no fans in the stands, but Atlanta really shellacked DC United, and then following a midweek beatdown by New York City, fired their coach. So we're definitely in a better spot than we were relative to the same teams. Talking about adventures in the back line, having that consistency at the back and having similar guys out there week in, week out certainly helps, particularly on the way that you've seen goals scored against us. Atlanta had success on the counter yesterday. New England had success on the counter in the midweek game, which is a very different situation than, a lot of that's panic. You're trying to get back, you're trying to recover, and that's part of what Losada's system is going to lend itself to causing. But you're not seeing quite as many goals come from set pieces or steady build up around the box. It really is those panic moments where you've got to get back, you've got to hopefully make a save. And frankly, Kevin made a fantastic save on Joseph in that second half that could have really blown it wide open for Atlanta. So they're doing it, but you're again walking on very thin margins there when you're talking about giving up lots of opportunities to counter. That's what attackers love to do. It's what they love to see is have that opportunity. And when you have a lot of those games, you're going to eventually get bit.
Yeah, your usual refrain on the show is that Bill Hamid is worth about a goal a game, right? And I think last night, as we said, Kempen played one of his better games, probably his best game this week. Probably not his best game of the season. He was playing much better prior to Hamid returning. But one of our friends and longtime listeners, Steve, was talking to us last night in the stands a little bit when I was venting about the fact that we haven't even seen Chris Seitz at all this week. Three games in 7 days, goalkeeper not playing super great. I am still surprised that we didn't see a run out of Chris Seitz in any of these games. Steve made a point that it's possible, and this is all speculation, of course, that Losada sees Kempen as potentially the long-term backup or potentially even a long-term starting option if Bill were to try his hand overseas again or retire. And perhaps that's why Seitz isn't getting the minutes right now, because Losada sees value in just playing Kempen through it. And from a career-building perspective, when you're having a tough time, get out there and play through it and come out the other side, because we know he has talent. What are your thoughts on sort of the entire goalkeeping situation right now and perhaps why we haven't seen Chris Seitz this week?
I think it's an interesting observation. At this point, Chris Seitz is 34 years old. John Kempen's 28. Keepers have a little bit more longevity, but so Kempen's certainly not a homegrown, fresh out of college or fresh out of the academy or what have you, but still relatively young and looking for a chance to to break through and really establish himself. The play is going to have to be better if you're going to be counting on him as a long-term option. Again, it's hard to speculate too much without actually being in practice, seeing what guys are doing. I mean, it's possible that both keepers are playing terribly in practice, and it's just a question of rolling a guy out, or who knows. There are so many different elements that go into that. It's not really even worth trying to hypothesize about. And I don't know that you can necessarily plan on Bill leaving unless there has been a discussion about it with him, or you saw what happened a couple years ago when you did leave and you're kind of in the lurch. Had two fairly veteran MLS keepers come in to fill the void, but certainly love having Bill back and fully in the fold. But you do need to have a quality backup keeper if you're going to go with Bill as your starter. I don't think he's been healthy for an entire season in a year since I've followed the team.
Yeah, not one that I can remember.
Sometimes it's better than others, but whether it's a knee issue or it's issues, and they're not problems that are Bill's fault or any you can't blame a guy for getting hurt. But when you're playing the way that Bill plays, he's putting his body on the line. It's a risk that comes with the job, and you've got to have a backup keeper. And it feels like we tend to draft backup keepers in the draft fairly often, of what dubious value the draft can be. But it seems like we're often looking to fill out that depth there with that acknowledgement that we do need to have a viable option back there. For me, that's not the depth that this team is lacking, first and foremost. That's not what we need to be going out and spending a lot of money on. Again, vice versa with Atlanta, they're spending close to $1 million a year on Brad Guzan, who had a couple of great saves yesterday, similar to Kempen. Probably not worth what you're paying for him. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point bringing up Guzan too, right? Is that, I mean, overall, would I feel better if Guzan was our backup versus Kempen or Seitz? Probably, but certainly not Guzan over Hamid to start. And when you look at what John Kempen did yesterday, I don't think there was a whole lot that separated Brad Guzan from him. I think it's largely the week as a whole, and still the battle scars from Nashville that are kind of seared into my mind. But I think DC United would be in a much better place if they had that health in the back line this week. So some center backs other than Steve Birnbaum to kind of help bail out Kempen on some of these situations would have been nice. And hopefully we'll get some updates maybe midweek on the health of guys like Donovan Pines and Brendan Heinzike. I know Heinzike we're probably expecting to be out a little bit longer, and we'll see if Losada is willing to talk a bit about what he's seeing from Kempen and Seitz in practice. And of course, who knows when Bill Hamid will be back. I'm hopeful in the next couple of weeks as well as we go into the stretch run. Was there anything else from this game you wanted to cover before we move into the man of the match segment?
No, I think we've covered it fairly well. I don't think we need to get too far into complaining about the officiating. My general thought on that is MLS officials are bad. They tend to be bad both ways. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily perfectly consistent, missing both directions, but they tend to not be exactly what you'd hope for. You talked a little bit earlier about how that made the game very choppy. I think he missed things in both directions. On the whole, the officiating did not determine how the game turned out, which is about the minimum you can ask for. You'd still like to see better from pro referees.
Yeah, absolutely. I remain surprised that account has not blocked me yet due to my constant venting about their inability to do their basic job. But one particular call that was very difficult for us to see it happen at the other end of the stadium was the Joseph Martinez goal. A lot of shouts from listeners who were watching at home and even fans who were seated elsewhere in the stadium thought that he was really offside and may have warranted a VAR look. Of course, it would have been checked. It certainly wasn't something that involved an on-field check or a monitor visit. To me, seeing the one replay behind us, I thought he was on, but I did not get to look at it much. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was a pretty quick turnaround to come back out and get the game going again. Again, I have not seen the replay of it, and I haven't sat down and hashed over it. I kind of mind that it is what it is at this point. But there certainly were a lot of people calling for it. At this point, VAR is ingrained enough and they have enough practice with it that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they actually looked at it and saw something that said not a clear and obvious error, particularly something like offside where it's, again, relatively clear that when someone is off or not. No, I could go back and watch the replay this week and eat my words, but for now, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because it wasn't like they took a few minutes and then still came to the same decision. It was enough time to have looked at it, but not enough time to really tear your hair out over it.
Yeah, I think I saw my first use of VAR in the Premier League yesterday on this season on an offside call in the Liverpool-Burnley game. And as an aside, I will tell you it is probably a better experience for fans to not watch them draw the lines. They are now not showing that, and they just show you the end product. And the lines are of course a little bit fatter this year, which I think will help. But the good news for the Premier League is that one was very clearly offside. I don't think there was much debate. We'll see how that goes as the margins get tighter and tighter throughout the season. Moving into the Man of the Match segment, I believe I went first on Wednesday, and the team gave us nothing to work with in terms of their Man of the Match. So, Michael, who you got?
It's hard. So for me, I really like seeing. I think we're not giving enough credit for Birnbaum for coming off injury and really slotting back in as a guy who, you're not surprised to see him on the team sheet. He does exactly what you're expecting from him. There's probably still a little bit of rust there to work off, but I thought he had a great game. I'm going to give my player of the match, though, to Yordi, guy coming off the bench, stepping up with confidence to hit that strike. Really could be an MLS goal of the week if we found out how to scan the bot accounts on the voting there. Fantastic strike from him, and he really managed to animate things. And again, not to be too negative, I don't think even Sam could give Kevin Paredes game a man of the match this week. It was a little bit of a coming back to earth for him after a long run of a really good form. But you expect that from young guys. He'll bounce back, I'm sure.
You say that, and I agree with you. But as I'm looking at the who scored results for last night, Kevin Paredes was the third highest scored DC United player last night, which surprises me because I thought he had some missteps last night. But the thing that constantly will give Kevin an edge is he never quits on anything. He to me, he very much embodies the Vamos por Más mindset of even when he gets beat on a play, he's the first person back. And the good news is he's young enough where he's allowed to make some mistakes still. But for me, oh man, in the interest of diversifying the results here a little bit, I will go a slightly different direction. Julian Gressel, I thought, had a tremendous game last night. And I hope Josh was out there listening to hear me say this because it's not something I've said much since he's been on the team. But I really thought, maybe we tell Gressel we're playing Atlanta every week. I don't know if that's what got him up for the game. But he played great. He won a number of balls in the midfield, as usual, quality deliveries in from set pieces and even on crosses. I thought Gressel was a monster out there last night. You can't take anything away from Reyna coming in. He wasn't in for very long. He came in the 50. He came in at halftime and scored just 9 minutes later on an absolute golazo. I apologize to our viewers who couldn't have been at the game last night. We saw on Twitter that the broadcast may have missed the goal in real time. I'll have to go back and watch. When he scored that goal, I thought for sure it was going to come back. Just for people weren't set. Ref wasn't ready. I mean, it was immediate. But no, that's awesome for him, and to hear from Birnbaum say he's just continuing to get more and more confident. He's a different type of attacker, and if this team can continue to score goals, they're going to put themselves in positions to win 3 points.
Sure. I'm looking forward to seeing that connection between Reyna and Flores in particular continue to develop. it's always good to have different looks and different options up there. And I appreciate the shout for Gressel because he really had a strong game at both ends. You have come used to expecting him to, be creating potential assists and going forward. But he also made some emergency defending and really held up his end at both ends. So I have no problem with that shout either.
Yeah, and with that, we'll look around the grounds here in the DMV. Loudoun hosts the Tampa Bay Rowdies tomorrow on Monday at 7 p.m. It looks like the Stampede are back in the stands out there in Loudoun, which is great to see and hear. They're always an exciting watch. Absolute goal explosion midweek, so hopefully they can keep that going. But just later today, the Spirit take on Orlando at 4 p.m. In town at Audi. So lots of opportunity, lots of things going on for the Spirit, many of which are not good off the field. Hopefully they can pull together a result and really plunge forward towards the playoffs today against Orlando. And DC United's next game is home on Saturday against Philly at 8 p.m. This will actually be our final show for a little while. Joshua and Sam will be back in the saddle hopefully next weekend, and then you probably won't hear from us. I'm looking at the calendar right now. It's looking like September 11th is the next game that you and I might be able to join a post-game show for, potentially. We've got the game next Saturday, and then, of course, we're going to an international break. So it's some time for DC United to get healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely a good time for that. I think we can be grateful that I don't think we have anyone participating in the All-Star game this Wednesday. Hope they all have fun, I guess.
DC United will likely be represented by a logo somewhere around the field, I would imagine.
That's about all I want to send to an All-Star game. Again, put all the plaudits on the players, name the team, whatever, but don't make them play any more than they have to. I'm sure Lasada has thoughts on the scheduling of an extra meaningless game.
Look forward to hearing from him, hopefully midweek as well, and I am actually intrigued to hear his thoughts on the All-Star game.
Oh, for sure.
And the other thing we'll mention here is some cool news from the team and their jersey partner Leidos this week, announcing that they're going to donate $1,000 per goal for the rest of the season, up to $20K, to fight multiple sclerosis or MS. As many of our listeners probably know, that's something that Dave Johnson is dealing with, and it's just super cool to see Leidos given some money towards that. It's a great cause. It's a disease we can definitely beat, and the research that money will hopefully allow for, and hopefully the black and red score a number of goals to hit that 20K threshold will be invaluable in the fight.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think Dave Johnson is still our most frequent guest on the show, and nothing but respect for the man and what he's done, and certainly appreciate DC United doing this. I would love to see DC United go ahead and get those 19 goals next weekend. Just go ahead and cover it, make sure we're good, and that'll have some pretty good effects moving forward, I think.
You'll never hear me argue with the concept of burying a Philadelphia team. What did we miss tonight, Michael, this morning?
I think we covered it. Again, we've talked about how, as being fans and in our show's format in particular, we're going to be yo-yoing back and forth game by game, trying to give you our thoughts, reactions, feelings on the games as they go. I think we were perhaps a bit negative today, which you would expect after a week where we dropped 3 games, and at least 2 of them felt like there should have been at least some kind of points involved in there. But I think in general, we're excited about this team. It's a very different place than we were a year ago, where frankly we were dreading turning on the mics after the games and finding something to talk about after another dire performance. This team is trending in the right direction. We've got a lot of excitement about what Losada is doing, and we're hopeful that that's going to result in points and eventually result in cups.
Yeah, let's hope so. And next year, with the return of the Open Cup and maybe even the Leagues Cup for DC United, I don't know if we want that or not. We'll add to Lasada's trophy collection, which already includes the coveted Capital Cup. Philly come to town this weekend. They're tied with us on wins on the season with 8, and they're only 5 points ahead of us in the standings. It's a team we played closely earlier this season, and it's a team that hopefully we can nick a point or all 3 from just 7 days from now. So if there's nothing else to add, thank you guys for getting up early with us this morning or listening to us on the podcast. We appreciate all your support, and we'll talk to you soon right here on Tried and True, the Morning After Show edition, presented by Heineken 0.0.